I'm 68 years old, and I'm sitting in a penthouse that overlooks the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, original artwork on the walls, a wine collection worth more than most people's houses. Everything I ever worked for is right here, and I've never felt more alone in my life. You're probably thinking, here we go, another rich guy complaining about having too much money. And you know what? You're right to be skeptical. But hear me out, because the path I took to get here, the choices I made, the things I sacrificed, might be the same path you're on right now. And I need to tell you where it leads before you get too far down it to turn back. I grew up with nothing, and I mean nothing. My father worked 2 jobs his entire life and still couldn't make ends meet. I watched him come home exhausted every night, watched the light slowly die in his eyes, watched him give up on every dream he ever had because he was too busy surviving to actually live. I made myself a promise when I was 15 years old. I would never be that tired. I would never be that broke. I would never let life beat me down like it beat him down. That promise shaped everything that came after. I got my first job at 16, working construction during the summers. I was the scrawny kid on the crew, the one everyone thought would quit after the first week. But I didn't quit. I showed up early, I stayed late, I learned everything I could. By 18, I was running my own small crew on weekends. That's when I learned the first lesson that would define my life. Outwork everyone, and you'll win. Simple as that. At 22, I was managing construction projects. At 25, I started my first business, a small contracting company. At 28, I had 15 employees and more work than we could handle. I was making more money than my father had made in his entire life, and I was just getting started. Everyone said I had the golden touch, but it wasn't magic. It was 80-hour weeks. It was sacrificing every weekend. It was saying no to everything that wasn't directly related to building my empire, including people. There was a girl I was seeing when I was 26, Sarah. She was different from everyone else I'd met, patient, kind, genuinely interested in who I was beyond the business. We'd been together for about 8 months when she asked me a simple question over dinner. Where do you see us in 5 years? I remember staring at her, my mind completely blank. 5 years? I couldn't see past the next contract, the next deal, the next mountain I needed to climb. I told her I didn't know, that I needed to focus on the business right now, that maybe we could talk about it later. She left 3 weeks after that. I barely noticed. That's how it went for years. A few months here, a few months there. Women would come into my life, excited by the success, the money, the lifestyle, and I'd enjoy it for a while. The dinners at expensive restaurants, the weekend getaways, the feeling of having someone beautiful on my arm at business events. But then they'd start wanting more. They'd start asking about the future, about commitment, about building something together, and I'd feel this panic rising in my chest because I had a business to build, goals to achieve, a promise to a 15-year-old kid who swore he'd never be broke and tired like his father. So I'd end it, move on. There was always someone new. At 32, my first business hit a major rough patch. A massive project fell through. A partner stole money and disappeared. We were hemorrhaging cash, facing bankruptcy. Most people would have walked away, started over with something safer. But I didn't know how to quit. I'd built my entire identity around never giving up, never backing down, so I doubled down. Worked even harder, slept 4 hours a night, missed my grandfather's funeral because I was in meetings trying to save the company. I remember my mother calling me afterward, her voice heavy with disappointment. He asked about you until the very end, kept wondering when you'd arrive. I told her I'd make it up to her, visit more, spend more time with family once things settled down. But things never settled down, because when you're always chasing the next thing, there's no such thing as settled. I saved the business. More than saved it, I turned it around and sold it 3 years later for 8 figures. At 35, I was wealthier than I'd ever imagined, and I had a new lesson burned into my soul. Failure is not an option. If you're willing to sacrifice everything, you can overcome anything. So that's what I did. I sacrificed everything, started a new business, then another, then another. Real estate, tech investments, consulting, each one bigger than the last, each one requiring more time, more energy, more of my life. At 38, I lost my last remaining grandfather, the one who used to take me fishing when I was a kid, who taught me how to use my hands, who believed in me before anyone else did. I was closing a deal in Singapore when he died. I got home 3 days after the funeral. My grandmother hugged me at the house, and I could feel how frail she'd become. "He was so proud of you," she said. "Always talked about your success." I nodded, feeling nothing. I'd become so good at compartmentalizing, at shutting down emotions that got in the way of business. It was a survival mechanism that had served me well. But standing there in that house full of memories, I felt empty. I told myself it was grief, that it would pass, that once I closed the next deal, I'd feel better. The years blurred together after that. More businesses, more money, more women who'd stay for a few months before realizing I had nothing real to offer them. I was 40, then 42, then 45, and life kept moving at this incredible speed. At 42, my father died. Heart attack. Sudden. One day he was there, the next he was gone. I flew back for the funeral, gave a speech about how hard he worked, how much he sacrificed for the family. Everyone nodded and said nice things. But the truth, I barely knew him by the end. I'd been so busy building my empire that I'd forgotten to actually know the man who made me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole life trying to not end up like him, and in the end, I didn't even know who he really was. At the funeral, my mom pulled me aside. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. "Don't wait too long," she said. "Don't let work steal your whole life." I promised her I wouldn't. I meant it in the moment. But then I got back to the city, back to the meetings and the deals, and the endless pursuit of more, and that promise faded like morning mist. Because that's what I did. That's who I was. The guy who never quit, who never slowed down, who always pushed forward no matter what. The women kept coming and going. Models, actresses, entrepreneurs. Women attracted to success and power. We'd have these intense, passionate affairs, expensive trips to exotic locations, champagne and late nights, and the illusion of connection. But it was always an illusion, because I never let anyone actually in. Never let anyone see past the success and the confidence to the scared kid underneath who was terrified of ending up broken. At 45, my mother died. Cancer. She'd been sick for 8 months. I knew she was sick. I'd call every few weeks, send money for treatment, promise to visit soon. But there was always another deal, another crisis, another reason why soon never came. She died on a Tuesday morning. I was in a board meeting. My sister called 3 times before I stepped out to answer. By the time I got to the hospital, she'd been gone for 2 hours. I stood in that sterile room, looking at her body, and I felt nothing. No tears. No breakdown. Just this profound emptiness. Like I'd become so good at shutting down my emotions that I'd forgotten how to feel anything at all. My sister wouldn't look at me. "She kept asking for you," she said quietly. "Even at the end, kept saying your name." I had no response. What could I say? That I was busy, that the business needed me, that I'd lost track of time? The truth was uglier than that. I'd chosen not to be there. I'd chosen the company, the deals, the money over the woman who gave me life. And now it was too late to choose differently. That night, sitting alone in a hotel room near the hospital, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the composed, controlled grief of a funeral. Real, ugly crying. The kind where you can't catch your breath and your whole body shakes. But even then, even in that moment of raw pain, I couldn't let myself break completely. Because if I broke, if I admitted that I'd wasted decades chasing the wrong things, what would that mean? That everything I'd sacrificed was for nothing? That I'd destroyed my relationships, missed my family's final moments, all for money I didn't need? So I did what I always did. I buried it, locked it away, got back to work. At 47, I sold my largest company for 9 figures. I was officially wealthy beyond any reasonable measure. I could buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. I was living proof that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. I was also completely alone. My sister had stopped returning my calls. My friends, if I even had any real friends, were all business contacts. People who smiled at me because of what I could do for them, not because of who I was. Every relationship in my life was transactional. I started dating a woman named Jennifer when I was 48. She was different from the others. Smarter, more grounded, actually building her own career. We were together for almost a year, longer than anyone else in decades. One night over dinner, she asked me about my family. Really asked. Not the polite small talk, but genuine curiosity. I gave her the sanitized version, mentioned my parents were gone, that I had a sister I didn't see much. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Not being there. Working instead." I felt that familiar defensiveness rise up. Started to give her my standard answer about providing for family, about building something meaningful. But looking at her across the table, I realized I was exhausted. Exhausted from the constant performance, from pretending everything was fine, from acting like I had it all figured out. "Every day," I said quietly. "I regret it every single day."
So stop. Stop working 80-hour weeks. Stop choosing business over people. Start building a real life.
I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I didn't know how. I'd spent 30 years becoming this machine that only knew how to work, how to push, how to sacrifice everything for success. I didn't know how to just be with someone, how to be present, how to not be constantly planning the next move. We lasted another 3 months before she left. "I can't compete with your ambition," she said, "and I shouldn't have to." She was right, but knowing she was right didn't change who I was. At 50, I woke up on my birthday in an empty apartment. No calls, no messages, no one who cared enough to remember. I'd achieved everything I set out to achieve and more. I had enough money to last several lifetimes, properties around the world, a reputation as a successful businessman, and I had absolutely nothing. That's when it really hit me. I'd spent 3 decades building an empire and destroying a life. Every choice I'd made, every sacrifice, every person I'd pushed away, it had all been in service of what? Money I didn't need, success that felt hollow, a legacy that no one would remember because there was no one to remember it. I thought about my father working himself to death for nothing, and I realized I'd done the exact same thing, just in a different way. He'd been trapped by poverty. I'd been trapped by ambition, but we'd both missed our lives while we were busy surviving them. I started seeing a therapist. That might sound dramatic, but I didn't know what else to do. For the first time in my life, outworking the problem wasn't an option. Dr. Morrison was in her 60s, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of speaking. In our first session, she asked me what brought me in. "I'm successful but unhappy," I said. "Then you're not successful," she replied. "You're just rich." That distinction, so simple, so obvious, broke something open in me. Because she was right. I'd conflated wealth with success, achievement with happiness, winning with living, and I'd spent my entire adult life chasing the wrong thing. Over the next year, I started to understand the pattern. The promise I'd made to myself at 15, to never be broke and tired, had turned into a prison. Every time someone got close, every time a relationship required vulnerability or commitment, I'd run. Because commitment meant slowing down, and slowing down meant potentially failing, and failure meant becoming my father. Except my father, for all his struggles, had something I didn't. He had people, a wife who loved him, kids who knew him, a life that mattered beyond the paycheck. At 52, I tried to reconnect with my sister. She agreed to meet for lunch, but I could see the guardedness in her eyes. The years of broken promises, missed events, chosen absences, you don't just erase that with an apology and a lunch. "Why now?" she asked. "After all this time, why do you suddenly care?" I didn't have a good answer. "I'm alone," I finally said. "I'm completely alone, and I don't know how I got here." She softened a little. "You chose to be alone. Every time. Every single time there was a choice between people and business, you chose business. You can't be surprised that people stop trying." She was right. And the worst part was, I couldn't even blame them. I'd trained everyone in my life that they'd always come second. Eventually, they'd learned the lesson and left. We started meeting more regularly after that. It was awkward at first. Decades of distance don't disappear overnight. But slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding something. Not the relationship we'd had as kids, but something new, something honest. At 55, I started cutting back on work, saying no to new opportunities, delegating more, actually taking weekends off for the first time in 30 years. It felt wrong. Every instinct screamed at me to keep pushing, keep building, keep moving. But I forced myself to stop, to sit with the discomfort, to figure out who I was when I wasn't working. The answer was terrifying. I had no idea. I'd built my entire identity around achievement. Without work, without deals, without the constant forward motion, I was nobody. Just a rich guy with an empty life. Oh, I had to start from scratch. At 55 years old, I had to figure out what I actually enjoyed, what mattered to me, who I wanted to be. It was like being a teenager again, except way more embarrassing and with a lot more money. I started small, joined a gym, not to network, but to actually work out. Took a cooking class, started reading books that weren't about business, volunteered at a local community center, and slowly, painfully slowly, I started to feel like a human being instead of a productivity machine. At 58, I met Elizabeth. She was volunteering at the same community center, teaching kids to read. She was 52, a former teacher, recently divorced. She had laugh lines around her eyes and zero interest in my money. We became friends first. Actually friends, talking about books and politics and life, not about deals or investments. She made me laugh. She called me out when I was being an arrogant ass. She saw me, the real me, not the successful businessman version I'd been performing for decades. After 6 months, I asked her to dinner. A real date, not a business meal disguised as romance. "Took you long enough," she said with a smile. We dated for 2 years before I asked her to move in. 2 years of actually building something, of learning to be present, of choosing her over work again and again. It wasn't easy. Every instinct told me to run, to protect myself, to not risk getting hurt. But I was so tired of running, so tired of being alone, so tired of winning at everything except the things that actually mattered. At 60, Elizabeth and I got married. Small ceremony. Just her kids, my sister and her family, a few close friends. No business associates, no networking, just people we actually cared about. Standing there saying vows at 60 years old, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not the adrenaline rush of closing a deal, not the satisfaction of winning. Just quiet, simple peace. I wish I could tell you that's where the story ends happily, that I learned my lesson, changed completely, lived happily ever after. But life doesn't work that way. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about second chances. You don't get to undo the past. You don't get those years back. You don't get to say the things you should have said to people who are now gone. My mother died without me holding her hand. My father died barely knowing the man I'd become. My grandparents died with me thousands of miles away. Those moments are gone forever. No amount of success, no amount of change, no amount of money can buy them back. I have a good life now. Elizabeth and I have been together for 8 years. I have relationships with her kids and grandkids. My sister and I talk regularly. I've learned to slow down, to be present, to value people over productivity. But I'm 68 years old. And I have to live with the knowledge that I spent 50 years chasing the wrong things. That I destroyed relationships that mattered. That I chose ambition over love so many times that eventually there was no love left to choose. If you're watching this and you're young, 20s, 30s, 40s, still have time to make different choices, I want you to understand something. You can't balance it all later. You can't say, I'll focus on relationships after I build my business, or I'll be a better parent after this next promotion, because later never comes. There's always another business, another promotion, another goal. The goalpost keeps moving, and before you know it, you're 50 years old and everyone you love is either gone or has learned to live without you. I know what you're thinking, but I have to work hard. I have bills to pay. I have ambitions. I don't want to end up broke like my parents. I get it. I really do. That's exactly what I thought. But here's what I learned the hard way. There's a difference between working hard and sacrificing everything. There's a difference between being ambitious and being absent. You can build a successful business and call your parents every week. You can chase your dreams and show up for your partner. You can be ambitious and present. These things are not mutually exclusive, but you have to choose to make them both priorities. You have to be intentional about it. Because if you don't actively choose relationships, if you don't protect that time, like you protect your work time, you'll wake up one day and realize they're gone. The most successful person I know isn't a billionaire. It's my neighbor, Tom. He's a high school teacher, makes maybe $60,000 a year, lives in a modest house, drives a 10-year-old car. But Tom has been married to the same woman for 35 years. His kids visit every Sunday. He coaches Little League. He knows his neighbors' names. He takes his grandkids to the park. Tom is rich in all the ways that actually matter. And for decades, I would have looked at him and thought I was better because I had more money. What a joke. I'd give up half my net worth, more than half, to have what Tom has, to have been present for my family, to have built real relationships, to have those decades back to live differently. But I can't. All I can do is tell you, don't make my mistakes. Work hard. Be ambitious. Build your dreams. But not at the expense of your humanity, not at the cost of every relationship in your life, not by sacrificing the people who love you on the altar of success. Because I promise you, I absolutely promise you, when you're 68 years old sitting in your expensive empty apartment, you will not be comforted by your bank account. You will not find solace in your achievements. You will not be able to have a conversation with your portfolio. You'll just be alone, surrounded by everything you thought you wanted and nothing you actually need. I got lucky. At 60, I got a second chance with Elizabeth, but I'm painfully aware that 50 years are gone forever. My parents died without really knowing me, that I missed my niece growing up, that I squandered decades of potential joy because I was too busy, too focused, too ambitious to stop and actually live. Don't wait until you're 50 to figure this out. Don't wait until everyone is gone to realize they mattered more than the work. Don't sacrifice your one beautiful, fleeting, precious life on the assumption that later you'll have time to actually live it. The greatest lie I ever told myself was, I'll make time for relationships later. Later never came. And by the time I realized that, it was too late to get those years back. You still have time. You still have people who love you, who want to be part of your life. Don't take that for granted. Don't assume they'll always be there waiting when you finally decide they're worth your time. Call your parents. Spend time with your kids. Be present with your partner. Build your career, chase your dreams, work hard, but do it alongside relationships, not instead of them. Because at the end of your life, you won't wish you'd worked more. You won't wish you'd closed more deals. You won't wish you'd made more money. You'll wish you'd loved more, connected more, been present more, chosen people more. Learn from my mistakes. Please. Don't wait 50 years to figure out what really matters. I'm 68 years old. I have more money than I'll ever spend. And if I could trade it all, every penny, to go back and make different choices, to be there for my parents, to build real relationships in my 30s and 40s, to not be alone for so many years, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't sacrifice your life for success. They're not the same thing. And by the time you figure that out, it might be too late. The clock is ticking. Not just for me, for you too. What are you going to choose?